Last time on D&D, The Arrival Session 2, featuring Calliope Laurelleaf, the Halfling Bard, Ellie Jobel, the Gnome Ranger, Fallon, the High Elf Cleric, Talaran, the Wood Elf Ranger, Trogdor, the Dragonborn Barbarian, and Twerpo, the Hill Dwarf Wizard. Last time, the party had just arrived at the Ivory Coast and had basically gotten a quest from an old man who said that some kobolds had driven away from his home, and he revealed to the bard that he had basically captured the soul of his deceased wife into a crystal ball because his wife had passed away during childbirth and his son was always so angry, so he wanted to provide a way for his son to be able to speak to his mother. Now, in my world, such acts as this of necromancy is forbidden, and it is a crime, essentially sort of like the Salem witch trials. Like if you do something where you're actually disturbing the dead, as in raising the dead, trapping their souls, or anything like that, and using necromancy to do it, you will find yourself basically just like the Salem witch trials, you'll be hung. So I set this up as the first adventure to kind of set that expectation that dark necromancy is not okay, and to see how the party would deal with it when given a situation where it's basically an old man who did it out of love for his son. So here we are. The party is resting at the home of Arvil, the old wizard that had asked for their assistance. The party recoups some of their health back before pressing on. The following morning, while the party rests, Ellie kind of scouts ahead. She follows a path and sees that it passes through a makeshift potter's field. An uneasy cold comes from the graveyard and the swampland at the base of the hill that leads into the Blackland Swamp. She decides to take a few steps away from the graveyard and wait for the others. Trogdor and Calliope decide to go through the graveyard, following the path, while Ellie and Fallon go on the outside on the western side, and Twerpo and Talaran go on the outside on the eastern side. So 2 people going through the middle, 2 people following around on the east side, 2 people going around on the west side of the graveyard. In the graveyard, Calliope notices bodies coming out from some of the shallow graves, and the duo race through the graveyard and step into the fog that is at the base of the Blackland Swamps. The others notice that the dead are rising, and Ellie and Fallon decide to quickly run into the swamp as well. Talaran seems hesitant about feeling something is unnatural about the swamp and this fog. But with the dead rising, he and Twerpo know that they're going into the swamp is probably going to be the best idea rather than trying to fight the undead that seem to be rising. When Trogdor and Calliope step through the fog, they find themselves teleported deeper into the swamp with no sign of the others. When Ellie and Fallon step through the fog, a similar situation happens where they're teleported, but they're not reunited with Trogdor and Calliope. But Ellie spots them, and they're quickly reunited. When Talaran and Twerpo step into the fog, they are also teleported deeper into the swamp, and it's Twerpo who spots the others and reunites. So the party basically reunites in the swamp and realizes the swamp definitely has some weird things happening where you first step in and it just teleports you right into the middle of the swamp. Trogdor, Calliope, and Fallon are able to pick up the kobold's tracks, and they follow it until the tracks split into 2 different directions. Twerpo does detect magic, and she is overcome with the sensation of magic, realizing that the entire swamp is full of magic. She sees a face shrouded in the darkness with golden eyes, and it shouts, "Die! Die!" before she's yanked back to reality and someone shakes her too. Talaran notices that prints heading in the west are slightly deeper, meaning they might have been carrying something. So the party decides to go west. The party finds a small cavern and enters the cavern. Trogdor takes the lead, using a torch to illuminate the dark cavern. Unfortunately, he triggers a trap, which alerts a band of goblins and kobolds living down below. The goblins rush up and meet Trogdor's flaming breath weapon, which he incinerates 4 of the goblins to death instantly. The party chases the remaining goblins down the cavern, where they're confronted by a total of 8 goblins and a leader. The party begins cutting through the goblins, and the armored goblin boss unleashes a bag of sturges into the air. Fallon is cut deeply and forced to back up. Ellie backs up with her. With the sturges released, Talaran backs up as well, using a torch to keep them at bay. Twerpo uses a spell to try and hit the boss, who is now in the middle of casting a spell. She hits his throne, destroying it. Critical fail. Trogdor managed to land a hit with a javelin by giving a good firm throw. Trogdor runs past a few remaining goblins, taking a few hits as he runs by with attacks of opportunity, But in doing so, he manages to land a critical hit on the boss, instantly killing him. The remaining 2 goblins simply surrender, realizing without their boss, there's no way they're going to win this fight. Calliope uses a charm spell to charm one of the goblins. Ellie happens to find a key on the goblin boss, but it doesn't seem to work with anything. She notices that the key was definitely damaged during combat, so Torpo actually uses the Mend spell to fix the key. The key unlocks a chest, and inside the party finds 30 gold, a hand on a small stick. Torpo uses Identify on the hand and discovers that this is basically a little staff of Chilling Touch that has 10 charges. Ellie takes the Chilling Touch wand and puts it in her bag, and when doing so, she actually feels the hand moving inside of the bag. The rest of the party decides to rest in the cave, taking a short rest here. During the watch, Ellie hears something that sounds like frogs and recognizes it not to be natural sounding frogs. These sound much larger. When Calliope is awakened after her rest, her goblin companion still charmed. She had rolled a natural 20, and I just thought it would be fun to have this goblin that was suddenly enamored with her, so I just let this go. He informs her that it was bullywugs, and he tells her there is a way to get around them. Calliope asks the goblin about a wizard, and the goblin explains that he knows who she is talking about, and he can take her pretty close to where this wizard supposedly lives in the swamp. The party follows this charmed goblin, who leads them through the edge of the swamp, where there is a forest. Talaran notices that the forest is devoid of any natural sounds. The party moves into the forest, and Fallon, Calliope, and Torpo find themselves being attacked by blight vines. Calliope casts Thunderwave, which shatters the roots. They notice that the trees and plants actually bleed blood. Calliope asks a goblin friend about it, and he explains that the Dark One has killing many, and the plants now feed off of blood. The wizard has been killing people and bringing corpses in, and doing weird things to people and corpses. The party enters and notices a small cabin in the middle of this clearing. Definitely suspicious, Ellie decides to sneak up on the cabin and peeks in the window and sees a hooded figure casting a spell, and there is a woman on an altar. Ellie sneaks back to the party and tells the party what seems to be going on, and the party decides they need to rush in, can't wait, and they come kicking down the door. Trogdor rushes in, swinging his axe at the hooded figure. The hooded figure begins casting another spell. Calliope casts a sleep spell. It impacts Trogdor and spares the hooded figure. Trogdor is awakened by Torpo's spell and rises up and strikes the hooded figure and renders the hooded figure unconscious. The party ties and gags the hooded figure and discovers that the woman on the altar is dead. Her chest is cut open from the neck down to her waistline. The party also finds a crystal ball with the image of another woman who seems to be crying inside the crystal ball. Ellie finds the hooded figure's diary and reads about how he had used magic to create a Chilling Touch wand and have a local goblin boss be employed to capture and kidnap women to bring to him. Gathering all the evidence and parchments, the party then hauls it and the hooded figure through the swamp, being escorted by the charmed goblin. Calliope recognizes the necromancer's name as the son of the old man who had asked them to recover the crystal ball, who supposedly ran away over 6 years ago. Outside the city gates, Calliope releases the goblin from the charm spell, but finds that the goblin is actually infatuated with her, having never been treated so kindly before, and tells her his name is Gavark. She tells him to run to the forest, and Gavark is clearly heartbroken. There was always a plan, just as a side note, to bring Gavark back to help the party out from time to time, but that has not happened. But in another game, another party ends up encountering Gavark, since I never got to use him again. The party brings the hooded figure and all the evidence back to the city and turn it into the church. Trogdor attempts to steal the crystal ball, but is caught by a party who scolds him for doing so. Ellie, wanting to learn more about moving through the shadows, basically multiclassing in the future, makes contact with a local rogue who points her out to a store to purchase some equipment that could help her enhance her skills. This is basically a code word for this rogue to basically let her know we have a recruit. The party is invited to the trial of Varric, who is the son, and Arvil. Calliope cannot bear to be there since she had promised to try to help Arvil. Trogdor doesn't care to be there and decides to stay at the tavern and eat. The rest of the party attends the hanging. Varric, with all the proof found guilty, is immediately hung, While Arvel doesn't have much in terms of evidence, it's clear he practiced some form of necromancy, and he is also hung. The following night, as Phelan sleeps, she finds her dreams are something unusual. An angelic being appears in her dream, and she finds herself floating in her dream. The angelic being tells her that she must stop the summoning of the Dark Blade. The angelic being touches her forehead, and she sees a vision of an ancient oak tree, the size like nothing she's ever seen before. Massive in height and width. There's people gathered around the tree and they're chanting. The leaves seem to be falling down from the oak tree at an excessive speed. One of the men stabs the tree and pulls the blade out, and in doing so, a woman seemingly falls out of the tree. The man grabs her, stakes her to the tree. He then slits her throat and gathers her blood and drinks it. The tree splits wide open and a large demon emerges. A unicorn shows up, and the demon takes the unicorn, breaks off its horn, stabs the unicorn through the heart, and turns it into a nightmare, a flaming black horse of death. The angelic being suddenly appears again and tells her that she must stop the summoning of the Dark Blade. Stop it at all costs and save the Dryad. Phelan suddenly wakes up, dripping in sweat, awakened from the nightmare.